rahmahullah as well. Then later on Imam Shafi'i rahmahullah, he traveled extensively in the Islamic world and learned from many great scholars and muhaddisun and fuqaha. And amongst the people that he learned also from was Imam Abu Yusuf as well. So Imam Shafi'i rahmahullah, when his time came, he was one of the great imams as well, but he is a student of the student of Imam Abu Haneefah rahmahullah. Then later on, the other imam which came, Imam Malik rahmahullah, in the meantime was born in 95 AH in Madinatul Munawwarah. He lived his life there, and he spent all his life there, and he lived there and he died there, and he's buried in Madinatul Munawwarah as well, in Baqi. And then Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahmahullah, he was a student, one of the students of Imam Shafi'i rahmahullah, and then he in turn was a sheikh of one of the shuyukh of Imam Bukhari rahmahullah. Imam Bukhari rahmatullah alayhi was born in 194 AH in Bukhara, 184 years after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And by the time there had some books on hadith had appeared, Imam Malik rahmahullah in Madinatul Munawwarah had compiled a book. Allah had blessed him with immense knowledge, and he could read and write, and he had compiled a book. And then he presented that book into various different ulama for approval. Hence its title, its name is Muwatta. Muwatta means a book which has been presented to other people for approval. And Muwatta Imam Malik was first book to be given the title Asahhul Kutubi Ba'da Kitabillah. The most authentic book, or the most sahih book after the book of Allah, was the title given to which book first? Muwatta of Imam Malik. Now Muwatta is, and then Muwatta of Imam Malik rahimahullah, it was, he taught it to his students in their thousands, and there was one particular student, Abdul Rahman his name was, then he learnt it from Imam Malik and passed it on to his students. So the Muwatta that we have presently has been narrated by Abdul Rahman, one of the students of Imam Malik. Because Imam Muhammad, one of the students of Imam Abu Haneefah rahimahullah, also learned under Imam Malik, so he modified it slightly with other narrations, and then the book that he passed on and he taught is often referred to as Muwatta Imam Muhammad, but is essentially the same book which was written by Imam Malik, but because it was taught by Imam Muhammad, hence it became known as Muwatta Imam Muhammad. And that was the first book to be given the title Asahhul Kutubi Ba'da Kitabillah. Later on, when Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, who was born in the year 194 AH, in the meantime there were other great muhaddisun as well. There was one, but in particular Abu Bakr ibn Abi Shayba rahimahullah, who was born, who lived in Kufa and died in 235 AH. There was another great muhaddis, his name was Abdul Razak San'ani from Yemen, and he was one of the shuyukh of Imam Ahmad, and Imam Ahmad is one of the shuyukh of Imam Bukhari. So he lived long before, and he has compiled his own collection of hadith, and it's titled Musannif Abdul Razak. The other one by Ibn Abi Shayba, Abu Bakr bin Abi Shayba, is entitled Musannaf Ibn Abi Shayba. These were all books which were written long before Imam Bukhari rahimahullah wrote his work. But Imam Bukhari rahmatullah alayhi was one of the famous, or about the most famous muhaddis, and he was born in 194 AH in Bukhara, and he traveled extensively to various parts of the world, and initially he was blind, but his mother made a dua to Allah, and Allah gave him sight. And then mashallah, and then he traveled extensively throughout the world, acquiring and seeking knowledge and gathering hadiths from wherever. He traveled to Balakh, Bukhara, Samarkand, and Kufa, and he traveled many times to Kufa, and then Basra in Iraq, and then Damascus, Makkah, Medina obviously, and he gathered all the hadiths whichever he could gather. And then when he was ready, then he decided to put them down and to compile a special book in which he would write down only those hadiths which in his opinion he thought was sahih. And now sahih implies a narration which has been received by a muhaddis, and through such a chain that every person in that chain is trustworthy, is pious, is of good intelligence, and so on. And because now the time from the Prophet ﷺ to Imam Bukhari was almost 200 years. He was born 184 years after the Prophet ﷺ left this world. But he started compiling hadith well in about 230 AH, to writing them down and so on. And so we're talking about 200 years plus after the Prophet ﷺ. Now the usual gap between one generation to another is about 30 years. So over a period of 100 years, you are bound to get at least 3 generations. If a person is born, for example, turn of the century, then by the time he grows up, gets married and settles down and so on, he's around 25 to 30 years old. Then he has a child, and then by the time that child then grows up, he's around 30 years old, 25, 30 years old. Sometimes you can have 4 generations or 3 generations, even 5 generations, depending upon how things lapsed. So by the time a hadith reached Imam Bukhari, rahmatullah alayhi, it had passed through many different chains, or many different links, from sahabah, tabi'in, 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 and so on. So by the time a hadith reaches Imam Bukhari, there are usually 5, 6, 7, or even 8 links in between. There are only about 20 hadiths in the whole of Bukhari, from about 4,500 hadiths, which have a short link of at least 3 narrators. They are called Salafiyat. A narration in which from the Prophet ﷺ there is a sahabi, so a young sahabi who heard something from the Prophet ﷺ and then narrated the hadith throughout his life. But when he was old, a young person heard from him, a tabi'i, when he was young. And then he'd been teaching hadith to other people. When he became old, then somebody heard from him. And then when he was young, and then when he became old, then Imam Bukhari heard from him. Only about 20 from 4,500 hadiths, only 20 hadiths, around 20 or 22, which are known to have a short link of 3 narrators only. Others 4. Even more with 5, even more with 6, some with 7, and up to 8 and 9 links. So can you imagine if a link is long, obviously there are more chances that hadith can be da'if, because like a long thread is weaker than a short. Hence, for example, if Imam Abu Haneefah rahimahullah, he lived beginning of the 2nd century of Islam, so the link was short. So if there was a narration which had been passed on from the Prophet ﷺ to a sahabi, to a tabi'i, he himself was a tabi'i, or if he heard a hadith from a tabi'i, there were usually 2 or 3 links, or at the most 4 links. And there are narrations which Imam Abu Haneefah rahimahullah had received with 3 or 4 links, 5 with 1 link. Only a sahabi between Imam Abu Haneefah and the Prophet ﷺ. Many more which he heard from tabi'ins, so there were 2 links, and then even many more with 3 links. But Imam Bukhari has compiled only 20 with 3 links, the rest 6, 7, 8. So if there was a hadith which was sahih in the beginning, passed on by righteous, intelligent, trustworthy, truthful people, but later on somebody who was not so trustworthy, who was not so pious, not so intelligent, and passed it on, now that weak link has appeared after him. That weak link. So in the term of Imam Abu Haneefah rahimahullah, that hadith could have easily been sahih, but by the time it reached Imam Bukhari, it had now become da'if. The sanad had become da'if. And like I explained in Jummah Salat, when people say a hadith is da'if, the hadith or the report on behalf of the Prophet ﷺ, what he said, what the Prophet said can never be da'if. What the Prophet has said is the kalam of Rasulullah, inspired by Allah. So the weakness is in the transmission. So when people say this is the sahih or the da'if hadith, it means the link by which it's been received by a muhaddith, that link is da'if. Not the fact that what the Prophet has said, the Prophet didn't say it. You can't be sure the Prophet didn't say it. He might have said it, he might not have said it. But the possibility, if that person, sometimes what happens is the hadith has been transmitted by someone who is known to fabricate, who is known to just make up lies and then